Now to a rare interview with a guest who is in disguise and the voice has been altered in terms of national security. He is the first undercover Muslim FBI agent to go public. He was known to al-Qaeda as Tamer el-Nouri, and he spent his life defending our nation by infiltrating ISIS and al-Qaeda. El-Nouri is sharing his story now in a book called American Radical: Inside the World of an Undercover Muslim FBI Agent. The book is out now. Just so you are aware, his identity entirely altered for matters of national security. Here now is his story. You're working as a police detective in New Jersey, and you decide to make a career change. How come?
Well, 9/11 was obviously devastating to all of us here in the country. But it was personal to me on a different level. After it was immediately discovered that the 19 hijackers were Arab Muslims, all of a sudden my faith got put on the forefront and was called out as evil. And it's not my faith. That's not what I recognized when we were all attacked on 9/11. So I wanted to dedicate my career, I wanted to dedicate my life to combating this evil and hoping I had somewhat of a hand, and never seeing that here in my country.
What did they teach you in order to do what you did?
It's just the overarching skill set of talking to people, the art of conversation, knowing how to generate a conversation with a complete stranger, which you'd be surprised is pretty much a lost art nowadays. But it is knowing how to present an image of yourself, getting close to someone, getting them to trust you, and then finding out what their true intentions are.
You make the point, though, that to be effective, the target has to choose you.
Yes, sir.
How do you do that?
Well, it's human nature. Think about what that person has to say to you to make you want to be their friend. Otherwise, the relationship would never blossom naturally. So I get to cheat in that arena a bit. When we have a subject that we suspect has ill intentions towards our country, is a threat to our nation, I get to study him. I get to learn his pattern of life. I get to find the best person I can be to insert myself into that life as quickly as possible in an effort to properly gauge that threat.
So your target is a 32-year-old Tunisian, Shaheb Essagayer. The Canadian government suspicious of him. They were listening to his phone calls. It is now 2012, and you're on a flight from Houston, Texas to San Jose, California. How did you get him to choose you?
I did my homework, and I was hoping to be able to generate a conversation with him to get him to believe that I was a quote-unquote like-minded brother. But because of a mix-up in seats, we were both standing, and his English wasn't that good, so he saw an Arab face, and he approached me. He greeted me, and when I responded in kind and I spoke in his native tongue, he was relieved. I helped him communicate with the flight attendant, and he immediately asked the flight attendant if we could sit together.
In the months and years after that, you have dinners and you have trips here in New York, you have trips in Canada. Why do you think he trusted you?
I think he wanted to believe that I was who I said I was. He absolutely wanted to believe, because that radical mindset, they know that they're a pariah, that if they were to talk to, if you were to bump into a Muslim American and he starts spewing these beliefs, they would shun him or criticize him. But because I didn't do that, and he was able to check me out, so to speak, vet who I said I was, it all was exactly what he wanted, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to give him a like-minded brother that sympathized and had the same ideology as him, so that he could trust me in time to reveal his plans.
You write about a time when you were in Toronto. You're in the basement of this building. You're with your target and 3 others, and you weren't quite sure you were going to get out alive.
My number one skill set, our number one skill set, our number one weapon, I should say, is our minds and our mouths. We're not Navy SEALs or military men. We have the art of conversation on our tool belt. So when we suspect that we're being vetted, know your answers, know your legend, know it better than you know yourself. And trust your backstopping and the people behind the scenes to make sure that you're real. And that should do it.
There are those who believe that part of your job leads to entrapment. What would you say to that claim?
Absolutely, positively, unequivocally no. For starters, entrapment has never been a defense that was successfully argued in the United States in any national security covert operation. But let me take it one step further, Bill. Every subject that I or someone like me we get in front of is a predicated subject, which simply means that this individual, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that he or she is a threat to our country. And even then, only until every investigative mean is exhausted does the undercover technique come into play. It's a last resort. And even then, the undercover is a professional law enforcement officer that's trained in not being the driving force behind any plot. These are their ideas. These are their overt acts. These are their intentions. Whether it's a good idea, a great idea, or somewhere in the middle, it doesn't matter. Those are their intentions. So I ask you, for those that say that, what would you have us do? Would you like us to see what happens, or would you like law enforcement to stop them dead in their tracks?
He came to New York. You gave him a tour of Times Square. He came to New York. You gave him a tour of Ground Zero. What did he say when he was in Lower Manhattan?
I never wanted to take anyone, any target, near Ground Zero. It just so happened that the apartment that he was staying at happened to be near it. And at the end of about 2.5 weeks of hearing his hatred and him planning the deaths of thousands of Americans and Canadians, it was just wearing on me a little bit. It was 24/7. It was exhausting. There was a lot going on behind the scenes that I was dealing with. And when I dropped him off that night, he put his arm around me, started rubbing his beard, looked up at the Freedom Tower, and said, "Tamara, this town needs another 9/11, and we're going to give it to him." And that was the first time in my career that I had a physical reaction to something a subject says. I guess it's easier when you're sitting in a restaurant talking about planning an IED. In my mind, I'm able to keep that wall up. But 9/11 was so personal to me, so personal to all of us. And for him to stand there and say what he said, the way that he said it, I almost lost myself that night.
It's now April of 2013, and the Boston Marathon has just been bombed. The Canadian authorities, who have been listening to his phone calls for some time now, decide to make a move. And your operation is over. How'd you feel that day?
Me and the other grunts on the ground, the case agent Nellie, Joey, my contact agent, we felt that there was a lot of work left to be done.
Also that day, you still believed there was a sleeper cell here in the U.S.
Yes, sir.
Was that real or was that imagined?
I guess it all depends on who you ask, but if you're asking me, yeah, I believe it's real. Of course, Shahab was a lot of things. He was not a liar.